Hello, and welcome to Creepy Raindrops. Before you drift off to sleep, let me tell you a story that will help you relax and fall into a deep, peaceful slumber. Sit or lie down comfortably and let the world around you slowly fade away. Tonight, I will take you on a journey through the woods where the air is cool and the shadows of the trees stretch long. As you listen, let your mind relax, your body feel heavy, and all the noise in your head gradually fade away. Before we begin, I'd like to know, which city are you listening to this story from? And what time is it there? The snowstorm hit just as their Jeep skidded to a halt outside Frostbite cabin. The air was a swirling chaos of white, the wind screaming through the pines like a chorus of lost souls. Claire squinted through the frost-caked windshield, her breath fogging the glass. "This place, it looks exactly like the photos from the 1930s, she whispered, her voice trembling, not from the cold, but from the unease pooling in her stomach. The cabin loomed ahead, its timber walls blackened by age, the roof sagging under decades of snow. Local legends claimed it was built by a reclusive prospector, Silas Harker, who'd vanished in the winter of 1936. His frozen body was found months later, half buried in the snow, his face twisted in terror. Marcus kicked open the Jeep door, his military-issue boots crunching into knee-deep snow. "Let's move. Storm's getting worse," he barked, hauling gear onto his back. Ethan scoffed, adjusting his glasses. "Ghost stories. That's all this is. You really think Harker's curse is why hikers keep disappearing here?" Claire ignored him, her gloved fingers brushing the cabin's rusted iron doorknob. It was ice-cold, unnaturally cold. As the door creaked open, a stale, metallic smell wafted out. The interior was a time capsule. Moth-eaten quilts, a rusted wood stove, and a single oil lamp dangling from a beam. But it was the wall that made her freeze. Carved into the logs were hundreds of jagged symbols, crude, overlapping circles and slashes. These aren't in any of the records," Claire murmured. Marcus shone his flashlight, the beam catching something glinting beneath the symbols. Blood, old, dry, but unmistakable. As night fell, the temperature plummeted. The wood stove roared, yet their breath still hung in the air. Ethan typed notes for his article, mocking Claire's superstitious nonsense. But when the first knock echoed through the cabin, 3 slow, deliberate raps on the door, even he went pale. Marcus grabbed his hunting knife. "No one's out there. We just arrived, remember?" He moved cautiously toward the door, the tension thickening the air. Claire's heart raced as she exchanged worried glances with Ethan. "Maybe it's just the wind," she suggested, though her voice wavered. The knocking came again, louder this time, as if something or someone was demanding entry. "I'll check," Marcus said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. He reached for the doorknob, hesitating for a moment before pulling it open. The howling wind rushed in, swirling snowflakes around him, but there was nothing outside, just an endless expanse of white. "See? Nothing," he said, but as he turned back, the atmosphere shifted. The lamp flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Suddenly, Claire gasped, pointing toward the window. "Look!" A figure stood at the edge of the tree line, barely visible through the storm. It was tall, shrouded in darkness, its features obscured. "Is that?" Ethan began, but the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Just a trick of the light," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. They all felt it then, the oppressive weight of something watching them, lurking just beyond the cabin's walls. As they settled in for the night, the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through old articles about the cabin. "Listen to this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "People have reported seeing a woman in white, wandering the woods. They say she's searching for something or someone." Ethan rolled his eyes, but Claire pressed on. "Silas Harker's wife disappeared the same winter he died. They say she went mad searching for him." "Great, so we're in a haunted cabin with a ghost story," Ethan replied, trying to lighten the mood. But as he spoke, the temperature dropped further, and the lamp flickered ominously. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the cabin, sending all three of them jumping to their feet. "What was that?" Claire exclaimed, her heart pounding. "Stay here," Marcus ordered, moving toward the sound. Ethan and Claire exchanged nervous glances, but curiosity got the better of them. They followed Marcus, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of snow that had drifted inside through the cracks. As they reached the back room, they found the source of the noise. A heavy wooden trunk had toppled over, its contents spilling out onto the floor. Old photographs, yellowed with age, scattered around them. Claire knelt to pick one up, her breath hitching in her throat. It was a picture of a woman, her face hauntingly familiar, standing in front of Frostbite cabin. This is her," Claire whispered, recognizing the same features from the stories. The woman's eyes seemed to follow them, filled with sorrow and desperation. "Let's get out of here," Ethan urged, but as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The wind outside howled louder, drowning out their panic. They were trapped, and the shadows in the room began to shift, coalescing into something darker, something alive. "Did you see that?" Marcus shouted, pointing toward the corner where the shadows thickened. A low, mournful wail echoed through the cabin, chilling them to the bone. The air grew heavy, suffocating as the temperature dropped even further. "Something's here with us," Claire gasped, her voice trembling. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming a figure that began to take shape, a woman in white, her face pale and gaunt, eyes filled with an unearthly sadness. "Help me," the figure whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Find him." The cabin trembled as the lights flickered violently, and the temperature plummeted to an unbearable chill. The friends stood frozen, caught between fear and the inexplicable pull of the ghostly figure. They had come seeking adventure, but now they were ensnared in a haunting that transcended time, a desperate plea echoing through the ages. As the shadows closed in around them, the cabin seemed to come alive, the walls whispering secrets of the past, urging them to uncover the truth. Would they heed the call, or would they become just another chapter in the tragic tale of Frostbite Cabin? The air thickened with tension as the ghostly figure hovered before them, her translucent form flickering like a candle in the wind. Claire felt an inexplicable connection to the woman, as if their fates were intertwined. "What do you want from us?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Find him," the apparition repeated, her voice echoing through the cabin, resonating with a sorrow that seemed to seep into their very bones. The shadows around her twisted and writhed, creating a vortex of darkness that threatened to engulf them. Ethan, still skeptical, stepped back, his bravado faltering in the face of the supernatural. "Maybe we should just leave," he suggested, glancing nervously at the door, which remained stubbornly shut. But Marcus, ever the protector, stood his ground. "We can't just ignore her. There's a reason we're here." The woman's eyes locked onto Claire's, and in that moment, a flood of images rushed through her mind, visions of a blizzard, a frantic search, and a man's anguished cries echoing through the snow. "Silas," Claire breathed, recognizing the name from the stories. "You're looking for Silas Harker." The figure nodded slowly, her expression a mix of hope and despair. "He was lost. I couldn't save him." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if in response to her sorrow. "You must find him before it's too late." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Where do we start?" The woman pointed toward the back of the cabin, where the trunk lay open, its contents scattered across the floor. "The answers are here in the past." As she spoke, the shadows around her began to swirl, revealing glimpses of the cabin's history. Images of Silas and his wife, their laughter echoing through the halls, quickly replaced by scenes of despair and loss. Claire knelt beside the trunk, her heart racing as she sifted through the photographs and old letters. "There has to be something here," she murmured, her fingers trembling as she picked up a faded letter. The handwriting was elegant, but the words were filled with anguish. "My dearest Eliza, the storm grows worse, and I fear I may not return." Ethan peered over her shoulder, his skepticism waning as he read the letter. This is from Silas to his wife. He was trying to get back to her. The realization hit them like a wave. Silas had perished in the storm, and Eliza had been left to wander, searching for him ever since. Maybe if we can find out what happened to him, we can help her move on, Claire suggested, her voice gaining strength. We need to know where he went. As they pieced together the fragments of the past, the cabin seemed to respond, the air crackling with energy. The shadows danced around them, urging them to uncover the truth. We need to find the old well, Marcus said suddenly, recalling a mention in one of the letters. It's where Silas used to go for water. If he was trying to return, he might have gone there. The wind outside howled louder, as if warning them against their decision. But it's a blizzard out there, Ethan protested, glancing nervously at the door. We can't just go wandering into the storm. We have to, Claire insisted, her determination shining through the fear. If we don't help her, we might be trapped here forever. The ghostly figure nodded, her eyes pleading, and in that moment, they knew they had no choice. With a deep breath, Marcus opened the door, the icy wind rushing in like a living entity. Stay close, he instructed, leading the way into the swirling snow. The world outside was a blur of white, the trees looming like specters in the storm. They trudged forward, the cold biting at their skin, but the urgency of their mission pushed them onward. As they made their way through the snow-laden forest, Claire felt the weight of the woman's gaze on her, guiding them through the darkness. This way, she whispered, following an instinct she couldn't explain. The howling wind seemed to shift, parting the snow as if revealing a hidden path. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon the old well, its stone structure half buried in snow. This is it, Marcus said, his breath visible in the frigid air. But what now? Claire knelt beside the well, peering into the darkness below. We need to find out if he fell in or if there's something down there. She reached for a nearby branch, using it to probe the depths. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed from the well, sending shivers down her spine. Help me! It was Silas, his voice faint but unmistakable, resonating with desperation. Ethan exchanged a worried glance with Marcus, who gripped the edge of the well tightly. This isn't good, he muttered, his instincts screaming at him to retreat. But Claire felt a pull, an urgency to respond to the call. We have to do something, she insisted, her heart racing. Maybe we can lower something down, Marcus suggested, scanning the area for anything that could help. A rope or a flashlight. Ethan rummaged through his backpack, pulling out a sturdy climbing rope. This should work, he said, tying it securely around a nearby tree. But we need to be careful. If he's down there, we don't know what we'll find. With the rope ready, Claire took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. I'll go. I need to see if he's really down there. Are you crazy? Ethan exclaimed, panic rising in his voice. What if something happens? I can't just stand here, Claire replied, her determination unwavering. I have to help him. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. If you're going, we'll be right here. Just call out if you need us. With that, Claire carefully descended into the well, the cold air wrapping around her like a shroud. The darkness enveloped her, and she felt the rope tugging against her waist as she lowered herself deeper. The walls were damp and rough, and the sound of the wind above faded into an eerie silence. Silas? She called out, her voice echoing in the confined space. Can you hear me? For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a faint whisper reached her ears, barely audible. Help me find her. Claire's heart raced as she reached the bottom, her feet landing on solid ground. The darkness was thick, but she could make out the outline of something. A figure lying on the ground, partially covered in snow. Silas? She whispered, stepping closer. As she approached, the figure began to shift, revealing a man with hollow cheeks and sunken eyes, his skin pale as the snow outside. You found me, he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. But it's too late. No, it's not too late, Claire insisted, kneeling beside him. We're here to help you. Eliza is searching for you. At the mention of his wife's name, Silas's eyes flickered with recognition, a glimmer of hope breaking through the despair. Eliza, I thought I lost her forever. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the shadows around the well began to swirl violently. You must leave. Silas urged, panic rising in his voice. The storm, it's angry. Claire felt the rope tugging at her waist, and she knew she had to act fast. We can help you find her. Just tell me what to do. But before Silas could respond, a deafening roar echoed through the well, and the shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf them both. You must go, he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. Before it's too late. With a surge of adrenaline, Claire grabbed the rope and began to climb, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm coming back for you, she called out, her voice filled with determination. As she ascended, the shadows clawed at her, whispering dark promises of despair. You cannot save him, they hissed, their voices a cacophony of anguish. But Claire pushed through, her resolve unyielding. Finally, she broke through the surface, gasping for air as she emerged from the well. Marcus and Ethan rushed her aside, their faces pale with fear. What happened? Marcus demanded, his eyes wide with concern. Silas is down there, Claire exclaimed, breathless. He's trapped, but he wants to find Eliza. Ethan shook his head, disbelief etched on his features. We can't just leave him. We have to figure out how to help him, Claire insisted, her heart racing. He's been lost for decades, and now he's reaching out for her. As they stood at the edge of the well, the wind howled around them, carrying with it the echoes of the past. The shadows loomed, restless and angry, as if warning them against their next move. But Claire felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. They had uncovered the truth, and now they had to find a way to reunite Silas and Eliza before it was too late. Let's search for more clues, Marcus suggested, determination etched on his face. There must be something in the cabin that can help us understand what happened to them. With a shared glance of resolve, they made their way back to Frostbite cabin, the storm still raging around them. The wind howled like a banshee, but Claire felt a sense of purpose driving her forward. They needed to piece together the fragments of Silas and Eliza's story to find a way to bring them together once more. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The shadows seemed to pulse with energy, as if aware of their mission. Claire led the way back to the trunk, her heart racing as she rifled through the photographs and letters once more. There has to be something here that tells us how to help them, she murmured, her fingers trembling with anticipation. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the contents. Look at this, he said, holding up a small, ornate locket that had fallen from the trunk. It was tarnished with age, but the intricate design was still visible. This could be important. Claire took the locket, feeling its weight in her palm. It must have belonged to Eliza, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it holds a clue. As she opened the locket, a faded photograph slipped out, revealing a young couple, Silas and Eliza, smiling and full of life. They were so happy, Claire breathed, her heart aching for the love they had lost. Suddenly, the temperature in the cabin dropped sharply, and the shadows began to swirl around them, coalescing into the figure of Eliza. Her translucent form flickered, eyes filled with longing and sorrow. You found it, she whispered, her voice echoing through the room. Please, Eliza, Claire pleaded, holding out the locket. We want to help you find Silas. What do we need to do? Eliza's gaze locked onto the locket, and a flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. The locket, it holds the key. You must return it to the well, where he fell. Only then can we be reunited. But the storm, Ethan began, but Eliza's expression hardened. The storm is a barrier, but love can break through. You must hurry. With a newfound sense of urgency, Claire nodded, determination flooding her veins. We'll do it. We'll bring you back together. As they prepared to leave, the shadows began to writhe, the air thick with anticipation. Hurry, Eliza urged, her voice growing fainter. Time is running out. They raced back to the well, the wind howling around them like a living entity. The snow whipped against their faces, but Claire clutched the locket tightly, feeling its warmth against her skin. This is for you, Eliza, she whispered, her heart pounding with purpose. At the edge of the well, Claire held the locket above the darkness, her voice steady. Silas, we're here to help you. We're bringing you back to Eliza. With a deep breath, she let the locket fall into the well, watching as it disappeared into the shadows below. The wind howled louder, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. "What's happening?" Ethan shouted, panic rising in his voice. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the well, illuminating the darkness around them. The shadows twisted and writhed, forming a vortex of energy that surged upward. Claire shielded her eyes, feeling the warmth of the light enveloping her. "Silas," she called out, her voice echoing through the storm. "Eliza is here. You can be together again." The light intensified, and the figure of Silas emerged from the depths, his expression a mix of confusion and hope. "Eliza?" he called, his voice filled with longing. "Yes, I'm here." Eliza's voice rang out, her form shimmering in the light. "I've been searching for you." As they reached for each other, the storm began to calm, the howling wind fading into a gentle breeze. The shadows receded, and the cabin was bathed in a warm glow. Claire and her friends watched in awe as Silas and Eliza embraced, their forms intertwining in a dance of light and love. In that moment, the past and present collided, and the cabin seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The air was filled with a sense of peace, as if the weight of their tragic story had finally been lifted. But just as quickly as it began, the light began to fade, and the figures of Silas and Eliza started to dissolve into the air. "Thank you," Silas whispered, his voice echo, softly as he and Eliza began to vanish. "You've set us free." Claire felt tears welling in her eyes, a mix of joy and sorrow flooding her heart. "Wait, don't go," she cried out, but the light enveloped them completely, leaving only a lingering warmth in the air. As the last remnants of their figures faded, the storm outside ceased, and the cabin fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene stillness. The shadows that had once danced menacingly around them now seemed to retreat, leaving behind a sense of calm. Ethan, still in shock, turned to Claire and Marcus. "Did that really just happen?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think it did," Claire replied, her heart racing as she processed the events. "We helped them find each other." Marcus nodded, a look of awe on his face. "We need to document this. People need to know what happened here." As they gathered their things, Claire felt a sense of closure wash over her. The cabin, once a place of fear and despair, had transformed into a sanctuary of love and redemption. They stepped outside, the snow glistening under the moonlight, the world around them peaceful and still. But as they made their way back to the Jeep, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that their journey wasn't quite over. What if there are more stories like this? She mused aloud, glancing back at the cabin. What if there are other souls still trapped, waiting for someone to help them? Ethan looked thoughtful. "We could investigate more haunted places. There's a whole world of stories out there." Marcus grinned, his adventurous spirit ignited. "Count me in. We've just scratched the surface." As they climbed into the Jeep, Claire felt a sense of purpose blossoming within her. They had uncovered a piece of history, a love story that transcended time, and now they had the chance to help others. With the engine roaring to life, they drove away from Frostbite cabin, the moonlight illuminating their path. The storm had passed, but the echoes of Silas and Eliza's love lingered in the air, a reminder of the power of connection and the importance of remembering those who came before. And as they ventured into the night, Claire knew that their adventure was just beginning. There were more stories to uncover, more souls to help, and she was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The road wound through the snow-covered landscape, the Jeep's headlights cutting through the darkness. Claire felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation as they left Frostbite cabin behind. The experience had changed her, igniting a passion for uncovering the hidden stories of the past. "Where to next?" Marcus asked, glancing at Claire in the rearview mirror. "I've heard about an old asylum not far from here," she replied, her voice filled with excitement. "It's said to be haunted by the spirits of those who suffered there." Ethan raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping back into his tone. "You really want to go poking around a place like that? What if it's dangerous?" Claire met his gaze, determination shining in her eyes. We can't ignore the stories. Every place has its history, and sometimes those histories need to be told. Marcus nodded in agreement. I'm in. We've already faced something incredible tonight. I think we can handle whatever comes next. As they drove, the landscape transformed, the trees becoming denser and the road narrower. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Claire pulled out her phone, searching for more information about the asylum. It's called Ravenwood Asylum, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was abandoned in the 1970s after a series of tragic events. They say the spirits of the patients still roam the halls, seeking closure. Ethan shivered, glancing out the window at the darkened woods. Great, just what we need, more restless spirits. Maybe they just want someone to listen, Claire countered, her heart racing with the thrill of the unknown. We can help them, just like we did with Silas and Eliza. As they approached the asylum, the wind picked up, howling through the trees like a warning. The building loomed ahead, its crumbling facade shrouded in darkness. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across the grounds, and Claire felt a chill run down her spine. Are you sure about this? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself. We have to. This is what we came for. They parked the Jeep and stepped out into the biting cold, the air thick with tension. The asylum's entrance was a gaping maw, the door hanging ajar as if inviting them in. Let's stick together, Marcus said, his voice steady as he led the way. They approached the door, the creaking sound echoing in the stillness. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of decay. The walls were lined with peeling paint, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. Claire's heart raced as they stepped further into the darkness, the shadows seeming to shift around them. Do you feel that? Claire whispered, her senses heightened. Feel what? Ethan asked, glancing around nervously. It's like something is watching us, she replied, her voice barely audible. As they moved deeper into the asylum, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with an unshakable sense of dread. They entered a large room, once a common area for patients, now filled with broken furniture and shattered glass. Let's split up and see what we can find, Marcus suggested, his voice echoing in the emptiness. We'll cover more ground that way. Claire hesitated, but the thrill of discovery pushed her forward. Okay, but let's stay within earshot. As they separated, Claire wandered into a dimly lit hallway, the walls lined with faded photographs of the patients who once inhabited the asylum. Their faces stared back at her, a mix of hope and despair frozen in time. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the corridor, sending shivers down her spine. She paused, feeling an inexplicable pull toward one of the rooms at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear faint whispers emanating from within. Hello? She called out, her voice trembling. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices overlapping, pleading for attention. With a deep breath, Claire pushed the door open, stepping into the room. It was a small, dimly lit space, filled with old medical equipment and rusted beds. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and she felt a wave of sadness wash over her. In the corner, a figure stood, shrouded in shadows. Claire's heart raced as she approached, the whispers growing clearer. Help us, they echoed, a chorus of sorrowful voices. Who are you? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure turned, revealing a woman with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. I am Margaret, one of the patients who suffered here, she said, her voice trembling. We were forgotten, left to linger in this place of despair. Claire felt a pang of empathy for the woman, her heart aching at the sight of her pain. What happened to you? She asked gently, hoping to understand the tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. Margaret's gaze drifted to the window, where the moonlight barely penetrated the grime. They experimented on us, trying to cure what they deemed madness. But we were just lost souls, seeking help, not torment. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she listened to the haunting tale. We want to help you find peace, she said, her voice steady. What can we do? Margaret stepped closer, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. You must uncover the truth of our suffering. Only then can we be free. Claire nodded, determination igniting within her. We'll find out what happened here. We'll make sure your stories are told. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, causing Claire to jump. Ethan! Marcus! She shouted, rushing toward the sound. As she exited the room, she found Ethan and Marcus standing in the main area, their faces pale with shock. What happened? Claire asked, her heart racing. There's something in here with us. Ethan stammered, his eyes wide with fear. I swear I saw a figure move past the window. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. We need to stick together. Whatever is haunting this place doesn't want us here. Claire felt a chill run down her spine, but she couldn't back down now. We have to keep searching. There's a reason we're here. They moved cautiously through the asylum, the air thick with tension. As they entered a room filled with old medical records, Claire felt a sense of urgency. These documents might hold the key to understanding what happened to the patients, she said, rifling through the papers. Ethan and Marcus joined her, scanning the records for any mention of Margaret or the other patients. Look at this, Marcus said, holding up a file. It details the experiments conducted here. They were inhumane. Claire's heart sank as she read the accounts of the treatments, lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and other cruel methods. This is horrific, she whispered, her stomach churning. No wonder their spirits are restless. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and the whispers returned, echoing through the room. Help us, they pleaded, growing louder and more frantic. We need to get this information out, Claire said, her voice filled with urgency. We can't let their stories be forgotten. As they gathered the records, the shadows in the room began to swirl, coalescing into the figures of the patients. Their faces were filled with anguish, eyes pleading for recognition. You must remember us, one of them cried, her voice filled with desperation. Claire felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked at the lost souls before her. We will remember you. We will tell your stories. The figures began to fade, but their whispers lingered in the air. Thank you, they echoed, a chorus of gratitude that filled the room. As the last remnants of their presence dissipated, Claire felt a sense of peace wash over her. We did it, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. We helped them. Ethan and Marcus exchanged glances, a mix of relief and disbelief on their faces. But what now? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. We need to leave, Marcus said, glancing toward the door. Before anything else happens. As they made their way back through the asylum, the atmosphere felt lighter, the oppressive energy lifting. They stepped outside into the cold night air, the moon shining brightly above them. Let's get out of here, Claire said, her heart still racing. We have to share what we found. As they climbed into the Jeep, Claire felt a sense of purpose igniting within her. They had uncovered the truth of Ravenwood Asylum, and now it was their responsibility to ensure that the stories of the lost souls were told. As they drove away, the shadows of the asylum receded in the rearview mirror, but Claire knew that their journey was far from over. There were more stories to uncover, more souls to help, and she was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The road stretched out before them, illuminated by the moonlight, and Claire felt a sense of hope blossoming within her. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, united in their mission to honor the past and bring light to the forgotten. As they drove through the quiet, snow-covered landscape, Claire's mind raced with possibilities. What if we start a blog or a podcast? She suggested, her excitement bubbling over. We could share our experiences and the stories of the places we visit. Ethan nodded slowly, his skepticism fading. That could actually work. People love ghost stories, and if we can shed light on the history behind them, it might make a difference. Marcus grinned, his adventurous spirit reignited. I'm in. We can document everything, photos, recordings, interviews with locals. There's so much potential. Claire felt a surge of determination. We can make it a mission to help other spirits find peace, just like we did tonight. As they continued down the winding road, the atmosphere shifted, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Claire glanced at the map on her phone, searching for their next destination. "There's an old lighthouse on the coast that's rumored to be haunted," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It could be the perfect place for our next adventure." Ethan raised an eyebrow, a hint of apprehension creeping back into his voice. "A lighthouse? In the winter? Sounds like a recipe for disaster." "Or an opportunity for discovery," Claire countered, her enthusiasm unwavering. "We can learn about the history of the lighthouse and the stories of the sailors who perished at sea. There's bound to be something there." Marcus nodded in agreement. "I like the sound of that. Plus, the coastal scenery will be beautiful, even in winter." With their next destination set, they drove on, the landscape gradually changing from snow-covered mountains to the rugged coastline. The salty air filled their lungs as they approached the lighthouse, its silhouette standing tall against the darkening sky. As they parked the Jeep and stepped out, Claire felt a thrill of excitement coursing through her. The wind whipped around them, carrying with it the echoes of the past. "Let's explore," she said, her heart racing with anticipation. They made their way toward the lighthouse, its weathered exterior telling tales of storms weathered and lives lost. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with the scent of salt and decay. Inside, the air was thick with history, and Claire felt a sense of reverence wash over her. "This place has seen so much," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. As they climbed the spiral staircase, the wind howled outside, creating an eerie symphony that echoed through the halls. "I can't shake the feeling that we're not alone," Ethan admitted, glancing nervously around. "Just keep your eyes open," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "We're here to uncover the truth." At the top of the lighthouse, they stepped out onto the balcony, the view breathtaking. The ocean stretched out before them, waves crashing against the rocks below. But as Claire took in the beauty, she felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you see that?" She pointed toward the water, where a faint figure seemed to emerge from the mist. "It looks like someone is standing on the shore." Ethan squinted, his heart racing. "What the hell? Is that real?" Marcus stepped closer to the edge, his eyes narrowing. "We need to check it out." They hurried down the stairs, the urgency of the moment propelling them forward. As they reached the bottom, the figure on the shore began to fade, swallowed by the mist. "Wait!" Claire shouted, but it was too late. They raced toward the beach, the sand cold beneath their feet. "Where did it go?" Ethan panted, scanning the area. Claire felt a sense of loss wash over her. "It was right here. I swear I saw someone." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the air, soft and mournful. "Help me!" Claire's heart raced as she turned toward the sound. "Did you hear that?" Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "It's coming from the water." They approached the shoreline, the waves crashing against the rocks, and Claire felt a pull toward the ocean. "We need to find out who it is," she said, her voice filled with determination. As they stood at the water's edge, the mist began to swirl, revealing the outline of a woman in a tattered dress, her hair flowing like seaweed. "I am Isabella, lost to the sea," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crashing waves. Claire felt a chill run down her spine, but she stepped forward, her heart aching for the spirit before her. "What happened to you?" Isabella's eyes were filled with sorrow. "I was a lighthouse keeper's daughter, taken by the waves during a storm. I've searched for my father ever since, but I cannot find him." Claire's heart ached for the lost soul. "We can help you find him. What do you need us to do?" Isabella's gaze turned toward the horizon, her expression a mix of longing and despair. "You must uncover the truth of my father's fate. He was lost at sea, but his spirit lingers here, waiting for me." Ethan glanced at Claire, his skepticism fading as he felt the weight of Isabella's sorrow. "How do we find out what happened?" he asked, his voice steady. "The lighthouse holds the answers," Isabella replied, her voice echoing like the wind. "You must search the keeper's quarters. There, you will find the records of that fateful night." With a sense of urgency, Claire nodded. "We'll do it. We'll find your father." As they made their way back to the lighthouse, the wind picked up, swirling around them like a living entity. The atmosphere felt charged with energy, and Claire could sense Isabella's presence guiding them. Inside the lighthouse, they hurried to the keeper's quarters, the air thick with anticipation. Dust motes danced in the beams of light, filtering through the windows, and Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. "Look for anything that might mention Isabella's father," she urged, rifling through the old papers scattered across the desk. Ethan opened a drawer, pulling out a weathered journal. "Here, this looks like it could be important." As he flipped through the pages, Claire leaned closer, her heart racing. "What does it say?" "It details the storm that night." Ethan read aloud, his voice steady. The keeper was warned of the impending danger, but he refused to abandon his post. He believed he could save the ships at sea. Claire felt a pang of sorrow for Isabella's father. "He was brave," she whispered, her heart aching for the sacrifices made. Ethan continued reading, his brow furrowing. But the storm was worse than anyone anticipated. The last entry mentions a ship in distress, and then nothing. Claire's breath caught in her throat. He never returned. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and the shadows began to swirl around them. "You must help me find him," Isabella's voice echoed, filled with urgency. "Isabella, we're trying," Claire called out, her heart racing. "We need to know where he went." The shadows thickened, and the air crackled with energy. "The sea holds the key," Isabella urged, her form flickering. "You must go to the water's edge and call for him." With a sense of determination, Claire nodded. "We'll do it. We'll bring him back to you." As they rushed back outside, the wind howled around them, the ocean waves crashing against the shore. Claire felt a surge of energy coursing through her, the connection to Isabella growing stronger. "Stand together," Marcus instructed, his voice steady. "We'll call for him as a group." They formed a circle at the water's edge, the mist swirling around them. "Isabella, we're here to help you find your father," Claire shouted, her voice ringing out over the crashing waves. "Please come to us," Ethan added, his heart racing. The wind picked up, swirling around them like a tempest, and Claire felt a presence rising from the depths of the ocean. "Isabella," a voice called, echoing through the air. "Father," Isabella cried, her form shimmering with hope. The waves began to part, revealing a figure emerging from the water. A man, his face weathered but filled with love. "Isabella, my dear," he called, his voice filled with longing. Claire felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched the reunion unfold. Isabella rushed forward, her spirit glowing with joy as she embraced her father. "I thought I lost you forever." "I've been waiting for you, my sweet girl," he replied, his voice filled with warmth. As they embraced, the air around them shimmered with light, and the shadows began to dissipate. Claire and her friends watched in awe as the spirits of Isabella and her father glowed brighter, their forms intertwining in a dance of love and reunion. "Thank you," Isabella whispered, her voice echoing through the air. "You've set us free." With that, the light enveloped them, and they began to fade into the mist, leaving behind a sense of peace that washed over the shoreline. As the last remnants of their presence disappeared, Claire felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "We did it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We helped them find each other." The Jeep rumbled down the winding coastal road, the lighthouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. Claire leaned back in her seat, exhaustion and exhilaration warring within her. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the ocean, and the air smelled of salt and pine. Ethan broke the silence first. "So, what now?" Claire glanced at the stack of journals, photographs, and voice recordings piled beside her, artifacts of their journey. "We keep going," she said, her voice steady. "We share these stories, not just as ghost tales, but as their truths." Marcus nodded, his hands firm on the steering wheel. "We'll start that podcast. Call it Spirits Unbound or something. Let people know these places aren't just haunted, they're alive with history." Ethan chuckled, the skepticism in his voice softened by awe. "Never thought I'd say this, but I'm in. Let's give these souls the voice they deserve." 3 months later, the studio lights buzzed overhead as Claire adjusted her headphones. Ethan fidgeted with the microphone, and Marcus hovered by the soundboard, grinning. Ready? He mouthed. Claire took a deep breath. Episode 1. The Lovers of Frostbite Cabin. As she recounted Silas and Eliza's story, her voice wavered only once when she described the moment their spirits vanished into the light. Listeners would later flood the comments, claiming they'd heard faint whispers in the audio, a man's laughter and a woman's sigh woven into the static. 1 year later, the trio stood at the edge of a snow-dusted cemetery in Colorado, breath visible in the frosty air. A simple granite marker read, Silas Harker, Eliza Harker. Together in eternity. Claire placed a single white rose on the grave. We kept our promise, she whispered. A breeze stirred, warm despite the cold, brushing her cheek like a grateful hand. Epilogue, The Unseen Road. Their Jeep now sported a bumper sticker. Ghosts have stories too. The podcast had gone viral, spawning a documentary deal and a non-profit to preserve forgotten historic sites. But for Claire, Ethan, and Marcus, the real reward was the quiet moments. The flicker of a candle relighting itself during a live stream. The faint scent of lavender in a room Margaret had once loved. The distant sound of a lighthouse bell ringing on calm nights. As they drove toward their next destination, an abandoned mining town in Montana, Claire opened a new notebook. On the first page, she wrote, To the lost, the lonely, and the lingering, your stories matter. We'll keep listening. The road ahead was endless, but for the first time, it felt like they weren't traveling alone.